Okay, well, I'll just introduce myself. I'm Jim Baker. This is Leo Soto, and this is a project that we did through the Google Summer of Code. So thanks, Google.
Yeah.
And it was a project that really got kicked off a year ago this coming weekend when there was the first worldwide Django sprint. And at that point, we thought it'd be kind of nice if we got Django running on Jython, some of the Jython developers. And we had previously looked at that, and Leo had looked at it a bit, but we had found that there were a lot of issues in supporting it. As I mentioned earlier, we really appreciate Google funding us for this project. It really turned this into reality, and a big thank you.
I want to start this saying thanks. Thanks to Google, who made this possible. Thanks to Leslie, who is not here, but we all Summer of Code students really appreciate her. Thanks to Jython people, who is very nice too. Thanks to Django people, Django developers especially, and also to ImageMaker, who is my employer. It's a very cool place to work on Chile, and they allow me to work half-time so I can work on this. So thanks to all of them, really.
I have to say that when I received this email or IM from Leo, and it was during the Python conference, asking me if I would be interested in being his mentor for this project, I just said to the group, Leo wants to work with me? This is amazing. I am so glad that he can participate on this project.
Same here.
So, because he already had a real role in terms of helping us become a reality by pointing out a lot of the problems that we had in Jython. So, why would you consider Django on Jython? And I really would put it into 3 areas here, and that would be around deployment, around integration, performance. And each of these areas really are things that, especially on the deployment side, I think we have some, a good solution around in terms of war file support. We'll be talking about that. Around integration, this has been Jython's story from day one. And around performance, well, that might actually be something worth considering. It used to be that Jython was really slow. It's no longer the case. But first, let's talk a little bit about Jython, because that's what I really know about, and I'm at your conference. You might not know about Jython. So it's about Java, of course, if that's not clear. And what we like about Java is, compared to C or C++, it's a great programming language for implementing systems like Python. In fact, the best thing you can do with Java is write Python, write a Python language. The second best thing you can do with that is write some of those really speed-dependent, performance-critical libraries. It's much easier to do this than to write it in C, trust me. One of the reasons that that's the case is because of things like, in Java, we have a really good, well-defined memory model. Things about concurrency, we have some well-defined ways that the concurrency it works in conjunction with that memory model. Now, granted, this is not the case when Java first started, out of the Oak era, out of the Hot Java era. It doesn't emerge until Java 1.4, but we're now well past that. And now Java is something where you really do have these sorts of things defined. And I would also talk about the standard libraries as being another great strength. Again, something not from the original days of vector and stack. Oh my goodness, who would ever want to use those? But nowadays, the quality of the collections API that we have in Java is just really good. And that's actually, Python has actually responded to that, incidentally. 3.0 is responding to the fact that some of those things are very well defined. So if you look at views on dictionaries, for example, or dictionaries in Python, is really response to the quality that you see in Java. Again, we are an implementation of Python. One thing that's sometimes not well known is that we compiled the Java bytecode. In the past, we basically do this on demand, but you can do this in advance as well through a setup tools or distools process. Another really nice thing, and I was riding in the car with Simon, and we just started talking about Jython, and he just like piped up and said, "Jython is awesome!" And I later found out that that's what Simon says a lot about any sort of technology that he really likes. But still, I really enjoyed the fact that he was talking about the technology that I work on. And he was just kind of going on this story about how he was able to learn Swing 4 times faster and all that than people who didn't have the shell available. It's true. I mean, we know that Python is a great language. If you're making Java look like Python, again, what's the best thing that you can do with Java? Have Python. Another thing that we really like about Jython that you don't have in the C implementation is we don't have a global interpreter lock. We don't have any ref counting. And again, I just wanted to dispel that myth because, you know, when you go and I've done this a number of times, but you go and invoke Jython 2.5, you get this thing coming up, you say, you know what, I really want a global interpreter lock. You know, it's kind of like sudo, give me a global interpreter lock. Well, this is what this is Python, this is not sudo. From future import GIL, never going to happen. Okay, can I make it clear enough? All right. Jacob was just asking me about 8-bit strings on Jython. This is a problem with IronPython. Yes, we do implement that. What we do is we basically actually, it's kind of bad the way we do it. We may make it more efficient in the future, but we basically just have our 8-bit strings live in regular 16-bit Unicode strings in Java. But we also implement all the other functionality that is somewhat hard from dynamic languages. So we have frames, coroutines, pretty much everything there. The only thing we don't have is stuff around like code and all that, which is one of the things that we originally identified as issues in getting Django running on Jython. In particular, the whole signals mechanism utilized that. Thank God that's all gone. It's okay. We helped, I think. We helped each other. So we're not having yet our Jython 2.5 release party yet, but we're getting close. I mean, I think we're at that stage where we got a, was it 99.4%? I think that's about 30 of these test cases, and this doesn't account libraries that are not yet under development that we are still missing from Jython, such as things like bzip2, things like that. But for those that are, about 30 of those test cases are currently failing, and that's what's accounting for a 99.4% pass. Again, take it as a grain of salt. Some of these are more discrete than others, but I like it when stuff is getting close. Another thing that I like, at least if it's favoring me, is this whole fact that we're 20% faster on Pystone. I mean, Pystone, it's a ridiculous benchmark, but it is the benchmark that we have. And we're faster. And we potentially could be a lot faster. Things around exception handling, a lot faster, about 10 times faster in certain cases, like re-raising exceptions, that sort of thing. Other things like object construction, we're a lot slower because we map our objects to concurrent hash maps. A lot of benefit in doing that for multi-threaded code, but still there's some overhead in terms of that setup. There was a 2.5 Alpha 2 release yesterday in honor of DjangoCon, and we appreciate being here at DjangoCon, so we wanted to make this possible. What's the advantage of the 2.5 Alpha 2 release? Well, it's basically an installable jar that a jar installer that you can use to go and avoid having to check things out of trunk. It's a little bit more difficult for people to do that in terms of having that build environment. So we didn't want to force everyone who would be interested in this to have to do that. Our beta, we're planning for September or October, and then hopefully, I had actually, when I originally wrote this, I was like, and we'll have the final release this fall. And Frank said, no, don't do that. So we're going to try to go and shoot for December or January, but we may be able to get that beforehand. Maybe. We use BuildBots. Here's a waterfall view of our current thing, and you'll see right now this is going against the CPython regression test suite. So we're just running reg tests, if you know CPython. And we are just, what we do is we just basically get our unit tests, by and large, out of the maintenance release of 2.5. And we run that. Now, some of those unit tests are not appropriate for Jython. They may have garbage collection as something that they're looking at in terms of ref counting, whatever. We modify some of the unit tests in order to account for the fact that we are running on Jython, and we add some more. But this is where we stand, and we're doing pretty good, I think, at this point. Certainly, you can run something usable and interesting like this. So I'm going to try to go, I don't want to spend too much time on Python, but it is kind of interesting. Here's the type of code that that's currently not working on Jython yet. I don't know if you're writing this sort of code. Someone wrote this code, and it's in testgenerators.py in the reg test. And this just kind of indicates, what we're trying to do in order to capture all of the corner cases. In particular, what you see here is the interesting interaction between a generator expression, generator expression on the top, and a yield that's actually occurring within the function, the def f. The function f actually is where the yield occurs. All right, that's an interesting function, but we're going to handle that. It's still not done yet, but I just wanted to point that out. That's where we are in terms of, and the same thing with the lambda below. So, in terms of, you think about the Titanic here, and, it really seemed a really good idea at the time, okay? But there were a few missing things in terms of its engineering and so on and so forth, and certainly the lack of lifeboats was not a good idea. So I just say that, JEE was a big, horrible mistake here, and that doesn't mean that you shouldn't be interested in running Django on it, because one, we have this thing called JEE, and secondly, you're not actually having to deal with all that crap. You're able to go and run Django on that app server. We want to use that infrastructure, hopefully a little bit more robust than the Titanic at that bottom level. As I like to say here, we write Java so you don't have to. Again, what's the best use of Java? Write Python. Write your Python language, bootstrap Python, and you're good. I just want to mention a few of those things that we really do like about in terms of Java integration. This is where Java really shines. I mean, and you can see this at Google as well in terms of the libraries they have put out that utilize Java, things around the open source libraries for managing PDF, and also there are about 8 commercial libraries that might make some more sense for you. Tons of tools for working with Excel that we don't have any equal to in Python, but you do in Java, and therefore directly accessible. POI is a good example of that. In terms of rules engines, if you haven't used rules, it's an amazing REIT engine. It's well worth looking into if that's something that you need. There's last time I checked, there was this package called Pachinko that implemented REIT, but it's not at all at the same level of maturity as what you have with rules or JBoss rules. The tuple space stuff that's out there, things like, coherence, Oracle coherence comes to mind as being a pretty strong implementation. Gigaspace is another one. Terracotta, you go on and on. There are some very interesting infrastructure libraries that you can have access to. Moreover, one of the things that you will find in terms of working, if you are doing Django in a Java environment, is everything that's already there. It's the rare case that you have a greenfield installation that you have to work with. You may need to be integrating with an enterprise service bus, what have you. There are other tools like JPipe, for example, that allow you to go and integrate between Java and regular CPython, but being able to directly work with your ESB, that could be a compelling thing to use Jython. So again, biggest benefit, you don't have to rewrite all that good stuff that's out there, or even just stuff you have to work with. So what I like to see is the ideal combination here is the Django app framework. Great stuff, very easy to go and get a project in. Actually, in terms of internet applications, it's really hard to see how Django really couldn't handle that compared to most needs. It's really hitting those cases. And of course, what we're finding here at DjangoCon is, of course, it can do a lot more than that. But if I were a corporate IT shop, I don't know why I wouldn't be using Django instead of like, JSF or something along those lines. And again, this performant infrastructure that you can have access to. So what I like to see here again is if the problem is J2EE, we can still run Django on that environment. And we're well beyond the world of Pet Shop. By the way, who ever had to deal with Pet Shop? Who knows about Pet Shop? Who despises Pet Shop? Just by the fact that I'm talking about it, you despise it. All right, well, you should. You just should despise it. I mean, it was sort of one of these things where they basically said, here's an application that shows the promise of J2EE. And for a while, people bought it. But again, we can go and do this jujitsu and really say, this is what we can do. So let's just keep on going. Oh, I couldn't, I wrote this slide while Guido was talking about Google App Engine. It seemed appropriate to talk about it here. So, I mean, Google App Engine, great stuff. Glad they use Django, kind of gives that, certainly brings Django up in terms of prominence and everything. But a few things here. We can support, we're going to show you Django 1.0. That's a good big plus. We have Unicode, and I have definitely been, that's one of the things that made it fun, was getting Unicode support in Jython that could support it for Django. The internationalization, ORM, unit tests, admin, shell, everything. I mean, we do all of those things. I mean, we would not be here where we are if we had not been running those unit tests. And another interesting thing is that, yes, that infrastructure in terms of Bigtable and whatnot, that's a pretty cool infrastructure, but it's a lot of lock-in. Being able to use some open source alternatives. So from Bigtable, you can go to HBase. MapReduce, not directly related, I think, to Django, but something that would be part of your Jython project, you can go against Hadoop. So what is WAR good for? Well, it's this web archive format. One of the things that we're going to talk about as well is it's this standard way that you can get into the Java app server environment. And it's really just a bunch of files with a standard directory layout manifest. It looks like this.
Yeah.
You want to talk about that?
Of course. Well, this is what we are currently generating for Django projects in terms of WAR file. Basically, what we make here is to make a big WAR file which is completely independent of everything and everything. So you take this WAR file, you put this into your production server, and you don't have to have everything pre-installed. You don't have to have Django or Jython or everything. So, excuse me, go back, please.
Oh, okay, sorry. I just wanted to show one thing here. This is what you have to do in order to generate your WAR file. Pretty nice. Okay?
Yeah. So basically, we put everything that is Django inside the libpython directory. So you have lib, which is the standard Python library. You have Django, which is Django. You have some glue code, modjai, Django, and DOI. And then you have your project. And that is basically, there you have everything. And we also bundle the media files inside the WAR. So you don't have to play with media root, add media admin root, and everything. It just works. That's cool.
So it's, again, a way that you can go and readily, as we see here, you can generate that particular WAR file with a standard management extension that Leo wrote here, and what a great package being able to support that in Django. The idea, by the way, is that at some point this will actually go against your IDE. Wouldn't it be nice to do this in NetBeans? Well, you may not be wanting to do this in NetBeans, but other people might. And that really expands the audience, again, for Django. I mean, we really want to be in a situation where it was, yes, there's NetBeans, there's Eclipse. It's not as good as Emacs or maybe Vim. I don't know. I haven't really formed an opinion of Vim. Certainly, TextMate, that's, we would have to say that's pretty good. But again, not as good as Emacs. But yes, there is a very good point in terms of really expanding this market. I mean, we really want to be in a situation where Django developers can be, working, in all levels and be able to go and use the tools they already know and love. And I think that this is, starts opening up that possibility. So again, going back to WAR files, it's an incredibly clumsy packaging mechanism. Well, that's Java sometimes. Yeah, but we have to go, and that's another sort of thing altogether in that realm. But WAR files, basically, they are what we have to work with, and they can go against, full list of Java app servers out there. I was looking at this thing on Wikipedia, and there were web app servers I had never heard of because I'd never done this search before. And it's like, wow, there's just some really tiny niches out there. And you can hit that, and that's pretty cool. And here's another thing that was kind of brought up in relationship to the whole Google App Engine, and that was the aspect of hardening. Well, Java is hardened. It's been pretty much proven to work in this fashion, and although it's not something that I find myself really utilizing, it is definitely something that is of great interest if I were doing cloud computing, if I were supporting that sort of infrastructure, like I might do in Google, or if I were doing that at 10gen or Joyent or what have you. So being able to lock down resources like this through a standard security model that has absolutely nothing to do with Django is pretty amazing. And I did want to say that there are a few things that we want to go and support for Jython that hopefully will be part of the 2.5 release. So we don't currently have some of the support in terms of being able to do dynamic proxy generation and so forth. We will get there. If you are interested in some of these details in terms of bytecode generation, I sympathize with you. Somehow I enjoy it. What's missing? What's missing today in terms of this? We currently don't have PIL. This is kind of bad. No photolog. I was going to say that we don't have a certain major package running on this that James is interested in, but thanks to some hard hacking by Brian and what was the other guy? Eric. All right. And Eric on this, we will be able to say something more in a moment. We also don't have a lot of the backends supported yet. This is really just a function of time. But I wanted to say that's pretty easy. In fact, let's look at how easy it is.
Yeah.
So,
basically, when you write a Django backend, database backend, at least you have some well-defined components. They are features, operations, the client, creation and introspection, and validation. Sorry. So, if you have most of these things solved for a DB API driver on the CPython side, like MySQL, PostgreSQL, or Oracle, it's not that hard to port that to JDBC. It's just another way to talk to the same database. So it's more or less the same features, more or less the same operations, exactly the same client, which is basically the tool to have a command prompt with your database. Exactly the same creation and introspection modes, where the data type mapping between Django fields and SQL types. And something with validation. The wrapper is a little more involved, but most of these things are pretty reasonable. In fact, before Django 1.0, it wasn't that easy to reuse everything. So we had to do a lot of copy and paste. Basically, we took the PostgreSQL driver. We had our own copy, almost a fork of it. We now have a slightly better driver, I'd say a much better driver, and we're going to show you that.
So can we switch to the demo machine? Thank you.
Okay, so what we have here is the complete PostgreSQL driver for JDBC. Here is the boring part where you have all your imports. But the what we have highlighted here, it's very interesting because we are taking the operations, the client, and the introspection code right from the default PostgreSQL driver. We take that and use that. It's now pretty modularized, so we just use it. So we have to do some changes because on JDBC there are things different that are, for example, on PsychoPG or on MySQLDB or other DB API drivers. So, for example, we have to pass that datetime objects, not strings for dates, times, and whatever. Same for booleans. Basically, everything has to be well typed. So, but this problem is not only for the PostgreSQL driver. This is a problem with what we will have with every JDBC driver we want to write. MySQL, Oracle, MS SQL, etc. So we have some pretty useful mixins that we just, well, mix with the base features or operations, and we're done. In the PostgreSQL case, we only have to mix these things in, and we're ready, which is basically the casting code. Now, as I said before, the rubber was a little more involved. We have some copy and paste here, basically for the operators. All of them are taken from the original driver, but it's not that hard to just steal them. So, and then you have basically glue code. You glue everything together, features, operations, the client, creation, introspection, validation. And the other thing, and the most important thing that the wrapper does is a cursor factory. It creates cursors. So the good thing is that it's not that hard to create cursors with JDBC because Jython have a pretty cool package called setXJDBC that is a bridge between JDBC and DB API. So you use JDBC just like you use whatever DB API driver. And that's quite cool. You just build a connection string. You then use it to connect. You use, obviously, the setting from your Django project.
Right, and one of the things that also is kind of interesting here is how you could use this to hook into, say, a connection pool on your Java app server.
Oh, absolutely. It's quite easy to come up with more settings, which will allow you to come up with another connection strings, and that opens up you to the world of possibilities of the Java infrastructure, the good Java infrastructure.
So, yeah, not the Titanic ones.
Yeah, yeah. And finally, we also have some cursor grabber, which is other thing that is pretty that is shared with whatever JDBC driver you want to write. So which makes the person S to question person S as to specify where parameters go, and JDBC use question marks. So with that we do that conversion. And that's pretty much it. You don't see any code that is PostgreSQL specific here. And so
what's the total line count in terms of the Postgres?
Sorry?
What's the total line count for Postgres in terms of that back end?
Just check it. It's 96 97 lines.
And I think there's like another small file as well, so we're not talking more than about 120 lines or so for this implementation, which I think is really kind of is a testament to the fact that it was pretty easy to go and take an existing backend like Postgres and be able to utilize a different driver against that, even with the fact that there's a different queue mark mechanism, that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting to also check out the other backend drivers that are for Django, like MS SQL driver out there. And it's quite easy because for every database out there, there is a JDBC driver. So
and a reasonably, and I would say a very high quality JDBC driver as well.
Yeah.
Unlike the sort of state that we have in Python, where there's some very good drivers and then some not so good drivers.
Yeah. So go back to the
Can we go back to the presentation, please? Okay, so where did that thing go?
I have one here.
I managed to drop it. I'll take this one, thanks. Do we just, oh, so we, sorry, I wanted to go and put this in here, but apparently this is actually on the way to EuroPython. Tobias Iverson and I were driving down from Riga, Latvia to Vilnius. And so Tobias is another summer of code student I was working with this summer, working on the advanced compiler. And this caught our attention, so we thought we had to document it. Code. It's a good thing. We all like code here, right? This is the mother of all demos, Douglas Engelbart. We won't quite have his demo. Apparently, it was well supported, well scripted and everything, kind of like a TED of the day. But we'll go and see what it looks like to, our mystery Django application running now on Django. I'm running on Jython. So again, can we have the demo? So what we have here is we're just running Jython 2.5, and this is should also work with WAR. We're having a little bit of problems with my server today, but we're just going to run it from the command line. Let that go. It takes a little bit more time to get Jython started compared to CPython. But once it gets going, it gets kind of hot. That's the whole idea of hotspot. And let's look at this mystery application. And I was just amazed that these guys pulled it off. I mean, a real, unbelievable bit of work last night with Brian and Eric. Basically hacking around the fact that there's a bit of a dependency in Pinax on Photolog, which ultimately depends on PIL and a couple other things as well. But here's the interesting thing that they found in terms of working on it, and it's something that we found with working on Django. And that is that if you actually go and think about these components, and I guess Mark was talking about this a little bit earlier, if you actually find these problems in terms of your dependencies, you may actually make your system better. And this certainly was the case with Django in terms of the integration with that back end we were talking about earlier. The fact that we're no longer coercing strings to be using a string coercion to get decimals and date times. That may be what the current Postgres does. I'm not certain. That's not what we're doing on the JDBC version of that. Do we actually do anything with this? Is this just like one page? Let's try. All right, actually, let me go and sign up. So let's see here. Demo. I don't think this actually does anything in terms of the configuration I have right now. Let's remember that. Well, we can verify an email address. Resend that verification email. Let's go and post a blog. Hey, let's read. Jython doesn't yet support everything we need. Okay, let's see. Really? Can you explain more? Cool. So very initial, but there's a fair amount of stuff that we're exercising. And I mean, how many projects are in PinX that we currently have? I guess we could look at that right now. Django Hot Club. Trunk. So it's a fair number of things that we're running in order to get a lot of that stuff running. I think there's a fair amount of exercise just in that type of interaction. Already found one bug. Don't remember how to recreate it. It's an interesting thing. Leo, you want to talk a little bit about the methodology that we went through in terms of unit tests? We could even bring up that website as well.
Yeah, basically it was what's known maybe classical continuous integration. Basically, we use Jython, which is a Java project, but it's very much build-bot. We basically every night check out all the Django code, the last Jython code, run every test there on every test, the complete test suite, and check out the results.
And I think one of the interesting things here is also the fact that we're now producing JUnit XML.
Yeah. We made the test suite, the original Django test suite, to spit out some XML, which is compatible with what JUnit in the Java world output. So we can take that XML and do some analysis about, use some tools with analysis, against that result. So that's pretty good. We also used the SAM infrastructure to test the original Django against CPython, and we helped it with the Oracle backend, which didn't have a build-bot at the time, so it was useful for Django.
I mean, I think one of the things that was really interesting in terms of this work was, and again, it's just kind of a tribute to Leo's dedication here, which I cannot say enough of. He's a good guy. When he graduates from college, I bet he would like to look for a really good job. So someone should hire this guy. So Leo basically followed the philosophy of what we see in Django: test suites, really test-driven, going against those doc tests, laboring like Hercules against it. Did a good job and that's going against a lot of those things in terms of Unicode or whatever, where it really does make a difference to get it just right, because ultimately that's how you have web apps that work with internationalization or what have you, or you can't go and inadvertently do CSS types of work or whatever. I'm sorry, not CSS. Cross-site, it's cross-site scripting, different CSS.
XSS.
Yeah. So cool. Well, we can take some questions now if anyone's interested in that. And let me can we go back to the presentation for just one more moment? Thanks. Awesome. There you go.
So I work in a Java shop, but I do Django by night kind of thing. And so I'm sort of, I guess, the target audience here.
Yes.
And I would love to get Django at my work, but trying to convince my boss of it, the biggest hurdle for me is sort of showing that it's proven, showing that it's not going to have a 10x performance hit. What resources are able to sort of show that, and what could be added or contributed more to further demonstrate the provability or the solidness or whatever of it?
Right. So it's a great question. I mean, first of all, I think that your boss is not going to be interested in it running until at least we have a final release. You may be able to pilot it during the beta, for example. What we really need to do at this point is go and work out. There are bugs still in this implementation. We need to be working with people like you to really shake out those bugs. That would be greatly appreciated. We also need to go and also support some of these additional libraries that are out there that we have some dependencies on for interesting projects that Django runs against. And I think the main library that we need support for is the Python imaging library, PIL. Once that's done, I think the fact that essentially we're doing code generation. Just say code generation. I don't know if it still works. Maybe you can say code generation. It's like little dust, pixie dust that you can sprinkle over a project, and it's like it just magically generates Java bytecode on its own from a domain-specific language called Python. And yeah. It's not very restricted, the domain, but it's definitely, we're utilizing the buzzwords du jour. And, you know, at the end of what's resulting is, you know, a WAR file that you can go and throw up on any Java app server. That's a pretty interesting and compelling deployment story. I'll go and say that people are doing this right now with JRuby on Rails. They're making that sort of claim. I don't know if they're using it in such an exaggerated way as I was saying it, just trying to come up with something here. But it's something that is in fact getting out there and getting very visible. Now clearly that's great for people who run Rails, but we're at the Django conference. We like Python here. And this would be, you know, an alternative to that where you're getting at all of the much more capabilities I think we see in Django, especially long term. So that's what I would respond to in terms of, you know, what your boss is saying. Is that a good answer?
If you could just speak a little more to the performance comparison between Java and Jython.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't really done that performance analysis. We've really been just looking at Jython versus CPython. The reason we're doing that is just to make certain that we're not regressing on a performance. But the 20% you know, performance that we have in comparison to CPython, again, that was on the Pystone benchmark running on Java 6, which gives you, if you're really interested in performance, you want to be running on that line of JVMs. It's something that we will be able to go and make some significant improvements on. We, in a couple weeks in Santa Clara, there's going to be a conference on the JVM Language Summit, which will be focused on dynamic languages running on the Java virtual machine. And already, again, JRuby has kind of piloted this, has shown that they can really perform much better than Ruby, and also through the use of type annotations, for example, or some degree of type specializations that can be inferred, can get to performance that in certain cases gets to Java level performance. That's the sort of work that, again, will be ongoing for us. It's not going to immediately address what your boss is talking about, but I will just say this. Most Java applications that people run in terms of for websites do not outperform Django or Rails because they tend to not be, you know, you tend to not be doing it as in the algorithmic way that someone in Django or Ruby would have in terms of, you know, they're basically replicating a lot of the infrastructure without a lot of the, you know, smarts that we were able to take advantage of from Python or Ruby. So I think for your average web application, it certainly would be performant enough, just like we saw with Dave Kramer's talk yesterday.
Thanks.
Hello.
Hi.
I work at a Java shop, but I write a lot of Django, I feel like. I think what you've done is great, and I'm really very excited about it.
We want to solve your schizophrenia.
I was just hoping you could talk a little bit more about the database layer. It was interesting. Query sets, slicing, lazy loading, initialization, things like that. Does it work the exact same as Django or not? How does that happen?
As far as we can tell, it works exactly the same way. It's just at the end of the day, it's pure Python that we're exploiting there. So there is no difference. We're running those unit tests. I mean, Leo, you want to add anything to that?
No, I think it's pretty the same. It's the same code. It's the same. That part of the backend is the operations part, and we're running on the same operations as the default backend. So it's pretty much the same.
That's great. That's the perfect answer. Thank you.
Yeah, and that really does address, your boss's question earlier. It's like, yeah, who is doing that sort of stuff in the Java space? Well, maybe they are if they're very sophisticated, but they rarely are.
Okay, thanks for that, guys. We really appreciate it. So, round of applause.
Thanks.